The cake was still warm when they told me to leave. 18 candles flickered against chocolate frosting as my world cracked. A drizzle tapped on the kitchen window, soft and hesitant, like even the weather wasn't sure it should interrupt. I walked in expecting some sort of celebration. Maybe not balloons or streamers, but something. A hug. A memory. Instead, I got a cake already half sliced, sitting alone on the counter like an afterthought. Adults pay their own way, my father said once standing in the garage last fall while sorting his golf clubs. I just didn't know the invoice would come with a locksmith. Daniel stood by the pantry with a folder in his hand. His shirt was perfectly pressed. He always looked like he belonged in a courtroom, even at home. Mom leaned against the kitchen island, carving the cake like it was just another Thursday. The air smelled of cocoa and citrus cleaner. "Happy birthday, Julia," she said. Her voice had that syrupy tone she used with neighbors. "We got chocolate. Your favorite." I glanced from her to Dad, then to the cake. "Where's everyone else?" "No party this year," Dad said, his voice clipped. "We thought it was time for something more meaningful." He extended the folder toward me. Inside was a printed invoice from Express Lock and Key, time-stamped 2 hours ago. $312.47. New locks. 3 exterior doors. My name wasn't on the service order. "I don't understand," I said, hearing my voice crack even before I finished the sentence. Linda wiped the knife clean on a napkin, her eyes never quite meeting mine. "You're 18 now, honey." We felt it was time. Time for what Daniel set the folder on the counter. Independence. Growth. "You've had it easy for too long. It's time you learn responsibility." Rain pattered harder now, rhythmic and insistent. My mind spun, trying to catch up. "You're kicking me out." Linda smiled like it was a compliment. "We prefer to call it a gentle push." "A gentle push," I repeated, "into what I haven't even graduated yet." "You'll figure it out," Daniel said, turning toward the living room. "You're smart. We've given you every advantage except time, except empathy." "You have 30 minutes, Linda added. "We've boxed up your essentials. The rest you can collect after you find a place." They left the kitchen without another word. The warmth of the oven lingered in the air, but the house felt suddenly colder, like the thermostat had been dialed back to punishment. I walked to my room in a daze. A duffel bag sat on the bed, my bed for the last time. Inside, one pair of jeans, 2 shirts, a phone charger, and a small envelope labeled birth certificate. I opened it. No note. No money. Just the cold paper proof of my existence. Thunder cracked as I stepped onto the porch, duffel over one shoulder. My jacket clung to my skin, barely repelling the mist, now turning to rain. The front door clicked shut behind me, a soft, decisive sound. Then the porch light went dark. I turned around. Through the living room window I saw them. My parents, sitting at the dining table, forks in hand, eating my cake, laughing at something Daniel said. Linda wiped chocolate from the corner of her mouth, still grinning. That image, so mundane, so brutal, burned into my memory like a scar forming in real time. I walked down the driveway, raindrops running into my eyes. My phone felt heavy in my hand, slick with water and uncertainty. I hesitated, staring at the screen names blurring in my contact list. Family, no. Extended relatives, silence. My thumb hovered, then tapped the one person who might answer. "Carly," I whispered into the phone, voice trembling. "Can I crash at your place tonight?" You don't realize how little your life weighs until you carry it in a backpack. The nylon straps dug into my shoulders as I stood in front of Carly's door, blinking back sleep and grief. She answered without asking questions, her dark curls tucked under a hoodie, eyes widening just enough to register what had happened. "Showers to the left." "I've got a blanket for the couch," she said, already moving aside. The couch was exactly as lumpy as it looked, and the apartment smelled faintly of old ramen and lavender spray. But it was safe, and in that moment, safety felt like luxury. Carly didn't press me. She let me curl under the blanket and stare at the popcorn ceiling while the storm outside rattled the windows. By the second day, I knew the building creaked when someone walked up to the fourth floor. The neighbor's dog barked every morning at 6:12, and I'd memorized the fastest route to the gym 2 blocks away for a hot shower. I kept trying to study finals were only weeks away, but the words in my textbooks swam and blurred. Maslow's hierarchy of needs didn't mention sleeping with your face pressed into a couch armrest that smelled like feet. I borrowed Carly's laptop to job hunt, scrolling through part-time gigs I was barely qualified for cashier barista tutoring math. I clicked and clicked, but everything felt like shouting into a void. By Thursday, I'd stopped checking my parents' numbers. They hadn't texted, called, or emailed. But then Carly Face suddenly tight-handed me her phone. You probably shouldn't look at this, but Linda's Facebook page, bright and curated, stared back at me. Empty nest vibes, the caption read above a photo of my old bedroom now converted into a yoga space. So proud she's spreading her wings. Growth. Gratitude. Next chapter. I laughed. It was involuntary, bitter, and brittle. Then I broke. Somewhere between the hashtags and the hardwood floor, I recognized something inside me fractured. I left Carly's apartment without a word, needing space air, anything that wasn't fake smiles and curated pride. The college stairwell smelled of dust and paint. I sat 2 steps from the top, hugging my knee's forehead pressed against denim. I didn't cry loudly, I didn't have the energy for drama. It was quieter than that, the kind of grief that seeps in like fog and clings to your skin. When I was 9, I asked my mom, "Does love ever expire?" She smiled like I'd asked if rain tasted different in other cities. "Not if you earn it," she said. Earn it? I guess I never did. That night back at Carly's, I dug through the couch cushions looking for change, just enough for vending machine coffee. My fingers brushed lint, a bobby pin, and finally the cool edge of a quarter. I pulled it free, then found another and another like treasure hidden in threadbare fabric. And then, like a whisper, I remembered Grandpa Joe's voice, raspy and warm from the hospital bed a month before he died. Box 447, he'd said, hand squeezing mine with more force than I expected. When you need it most. I hadn't understood. We thought he was delirious. Box 447. A safety deposit box. A locker. The numbers echoed suddenly alive in my memory. I closed my fist around the coins. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I had to find out. I grabbed my jacket, swallowed my fear, and stepped into the chill air. She gathers her courage quarters and heads toward Phoenix State Bank. I didn't believe in last-minute miracles until the vault door opened. Phoenix State Bank didn't look like the kind of place that held secrets. It looked like it held mortgages, long sighs, and old money. The building loomed like a relic from the past, marble floors, high ceilings, golden trim worn down by time and hands. Even the pens were chained to little glass counters like they couldn't be trusted. I stepped through the brass doors and immediately felt out of place. My hoodie was damp from a morning drizzle and my sneakers squeaked slightly against the floor. Everyone else wore business attire and purpose. The teller was a man in his 60s with tired eyes and a thin mustache. He looked at me with a patience that felt rehearsed. "Can I help you, I think there's a box here. Under my name. Julia Morgan. Box. 447, I think." He blinked, then began typing. I could hear the clack of the keys, mechanical and slow. He didn't ask for ID. He just stared at the screen a little longer than I expected before standing up. "Wait here," he said. Every second felt like it stretched. I glanced around the lobby. A woman filled out a form near the window. A little boy sat cross-legged, staring at the ceiling mural of a bald eagle holding a banner. Then the teller returned with a white envelope. It had my name on it. My full name handwritten in shaky but familiar cursive. "Follow me," he said, no longer sounding rehearsed. He led me past the counters into a hallway lined with security doors. At the end, a vault attendant stood holding a clipboard, eyeing me with cautious curiosity. She unlocked a heavy steel door with a key and a fingerprint scan. Inside the room was silent and cool, lined with small metal boxes. Box 447 was halfway up the far wall. The teller inserted a key and turned it. Then he handed me the box and stepped back. "You'll want privacy." They left me in the room alone. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope first. A card slipped out. It was cream-colored, embossed with the bank's logo. Inside, in clean typewritten text, it read, "Happy 18th of Jules. Not everything is what it seems. Trust the box. Joe." I stared at it, heart thudding. Then I slid the box open. Inside was another sealed envelope thicker than the first. Beneath it, wrapped in brown paper, was a small safe key. I picked it up, inspecting the grooves. It looked ordinary. The kind of thing you'd forget in a drawer until it mattered. I opened the envelope. Another letter, this one longer, typed on Grandpa Joe's old typewriter, the font unmistakable, a little uneven in spots. "Julia, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And your parents. Well, they've likely shown their true colors by now. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from that. I wanted to. But I've come to learn something hard. In my old age, people don't always want saving until the ground crumbles beneath them. This key opens a private safe, not here, but somewhere else. The details are in the next envelope. Use what's inside carefully. Don't rush. They'll show you who they are. Be ready. And remember, you're more Morgan than they'll ever admit. Love, Joe." I sat there a long time, the hum of the lights pressing into the silence. He knew. He knew they'd turn on me. He planned for it. I reached for the second envelope, hands suddenly cold. The flap was unbroken. Across the front in red ink were the words, "The real inheritance." Turns out my parents didn't inherit anything except a lie built for 3 years. The envelope labeled "The real inheritance" was thicker than I expected. It had weight, not just physical, but emotional, like the air before a thunderstorm. I broke the seal with my thumb, careful not to tear the handwriting that felt like Grandpa Joe's final whisper. Inside were 3 things: a manila folder with legal documents, a handwritten letter, and a crisp white business card with a name and number, Rachel Levine Esky. I started with the letter. Julia. If you're reading this, it means you had the courage to come this far. You always had that in you. You just didn't know yet. This envelope contains the truth. Something I've been planning since your 15th birthday. I saw it in your parents' eyes back then. That hunger. That entitlement. The way they started talking about, "When the house is ours," as if I was already gone. I knew they'd try to take everything. But they couldn't take you. So I gave it all to you. Everything: the house in Sedona, the 2019 Outback. The investment accounts. It's all in your name now. Your parents have 30 days to vacate the Sedona property. The documents are notarized and filed. Rachel will help you with everything. Remember what I said: love without conditions, power without revenge, but with memory. Don't become like them. Love you always, Joe. I had to reread it twice before the words made sense. The manila folder was stamped Morgan Family Trust. I opened it with the same care you'd use for something ancient or sacred. There it was in black ink and legalese, my name listed as sole beneficiary. Me, Julia Morgan, not Daniel, not Linda. There were deeds account summaries and a clause near the bottom of the property section that froze me. Occupants not listed under the trust shall vacate the primary residence within 30 calendar days of the beneficiary's 18th birthday. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or cry. For once, Grandpa Joe had outmaneuvered them. Maybe he always had. The house they bragged about, the one they remodeled to impress neighbors and host wine tastings. Not theirs. The car Dad drove to his consulting job 3 times a week. Not his. even the vacation property they once said would fund their retirement plans. It all belonged to me now. It wasn't just justice, it was precision. I closed the folder slowly, hands shaking, not from fear this time, but from the sudden shift in gravity. The power wasn't theoretical anymore. It was mine. All of it. In the back of the envelope, a smaller letter lay folded in thirds. This one had neater script, and a scent I couldn't place, lavender maybe. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. Dear Julia, if this reaches you, it means my brother trusted you more than anyone else. My name is Rachel Levine. I'm Joe's sister and your great-aunt, though we've never met. I'm a retired attorney and the executor of your trust. Everything has been legally set up, and I've kept it airtight for years. We always hoped you wouldn't need to open this. But life, as Joe used to say, rarely cares for our plans. Inside this folder is a map, not just of wealth, but of legacy. You have the legal right to claim it all. When you're ready, call me. We'll take it from there. Yours, Rachel. I stared at the card again. Rachel Levine. A name I'd never heard yet. Somehow it steadied me. Grandpa had built a safety net that stretched farther than I imagined. I pulled out my phone, hesitating only for a moment. Then I dialed the number printed beneath her name. 1 ring, 2, then hello. Her voice was calm, older, warm. I swallowed. Hi, this is Julia Morgan. A pause. Then she said, Julia, we've been expecting your call. If adulthood was their reason to abandon me, I'd show them what being an adult really looks like. I stared down at the cafe's cracked laminate table, my laptop humming like a quiet dare. Next to me, my coffee had gone cold, untouched. Carly sat across, eyes wide, watching as I scrolled through the legal PDFs Rachel had emailed me that morning. So Carly said slowly, your parents are technically squatting in your house. Legally, yes. Holy crap. I knotted my fingers tight around the cup. They gave me 30 minutes to erase 18 years. I'm giving them 30 days. Rachel's voice echoed from earlier that morning, calm, practiced a velvet blade. Julia Power is never loud. It's patient. That's why we're going to do this by the book. She had walked me through everything: how to issue a formal notice to vacate, how to retain a locksmith, even how to document everything in case Daniel and Linda decided to push back. Joe hadn't just left me property, he'd left me a playbook. The eviction notice was already drafted. Rachel's estate lawyer, Mr. Harmon, had offered to courier it personally, but I chose something a little more poetic. You sure you want to watch it happen? Carly asked. I nodded. I don't want revenge. I want them to understand I'm not the same girl who stood outside in the rain. It was more than that. I wanted them to see me making adult choices with a grace they never offered me. That's how Joe would have done it. Over the next 2 days, I lined up every step. I hired a locksmith, same company my dad used to lock me out. I scheduled a deep cleaning crew for the day after the eviction deadline. I even called the Sedona utility companies to put the house bills in my name. And then, on March 25th, I walked into a small bakery 2 blocks from Carly's place. I want a birthday cake, I told the clerk. Chocolate frosting. 18 candles. He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. That night, Carly and I sat in her living room. She played music off her phone, feet tucked beneath her on the couch, while I carefully lit the candles. The frosting read, "To being the adult in the room." She grinned. Damn. That's cold. Just accurate, I said, but the smile didn't quite reach my eyes. At 6:32 p.m., the process server sent me a text approaching front door now. Carly looked up from her cup. You sure you're okay? I didn't answer. I was already standing by the window, the cake box in one hand, car keys in the other. Come with me. A few minutes later, we were parked across the street from the house I had once called home. The porch light flickered on as the process server stepped up, manila envelope in hand. I recognized Daniel's silhouette through the frosted glass. He opened the door with that familiar tilt of the chin, half challenge, half disdain. The process server didn't flinch. You've been served. Happy birthday, Julia. I didn't expect him to look across the street. But he did. He saw me. The same girl they'd locked out now, watching them get locked out of their illusions. I got out of the car slowly, the cake in my hands. Linda had appeared behind him now, mouth slightly open, one hand over her chest. I walked up to the edge of the driveway. Just far enough. Lit candles glowed against the chocolate frosting. I bit into the corner, rich, sweet, and mine. Then I looked up, meeting Daniel's stunned expression with steady calm. Adults pay their own way. You're not. So you'll need to go. They once gave me 30 minutes to leave. I just gave them 30 days. Carly drummed her fingers against the steering wheel, the dull rhythm barely audible over my breathing. I was seated beside her in the passenger seat, parked directly across from the house I had once thought was mine, warm, safe, permanent. Now it just looked like a facade with brick siding. You ready for this? She asked, not looking over. I nodded, eyes fixed on the front door. The porch was quiet. The wind carried the faint scent of watered grass and jasmine, the kind of scent that made you think things could still be innocent. But there was nothing innocent left about that place. Right on schedule, a black sedan pulled up behind us. The process server stepped out, tall, no nonsense, holding a thin manila folder under one arm like it was just another Tuesday. Carly muttered, "Here comes justice in khakis." I almost laughed. Almost. We watched as he strode across the street, up the walkway, and rang the bell. I could see Daniel's outline move behind the frosted glass, his familiar, impatient gait. The door opened a crack, then wider. Daniel was in loungewear. Slippers. A mug in his hand. His brows furrowed at the stranger standing on the porch. The process server didn't blink. Daniel Morgan. Daniel nodded slowly. You've been served. The manila folder was placed gently in his hand like it was a dinner invitation. Daniel took it, confused eyes scanning the first page as the door stayed ajar. His lips began to move, mouthing the words, his eyes darkened. From inside, Linda's voice. Who is it? She appeared beside him in a flash of cream sweater and suspicion. Her eyes darted from the folder to his face, then to the man standing with military stillness. Linda snatched the folder. Her fingers trembled as she read, face blanching in real time. Eviction notice, she snapped. This has to be a mistake. But even as she said it, I saw recognition creep in. Somewhere beneath her fury was a flicker of fear. Daniel's head lifted. His gaze cut across the street, locking onto me. I stepped out of Carly's car. Linda's hand clutched Daniel's arm. She can't do this. She's a child. I walked to the curb, just close enough to be heard, not close enough to be touched. I didn't raise my voice. Adults pay their own way. You're not. So you're out. Linda's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. She looked like she was choking on her own disbelief. Daniel stepped forward. You think this is over? I met his glare with the calm Grandpa used to wear when someone underestimated him. It hasn't even started. They used my grandfather's money to renovate the kitchen. Legally, that just means I own a nicer kitchen. Aunt Rachel's office smelled like lemon polish and resolution. Her desk was spotless, her pen clicks precise, her demeanor surgically calm. I sat opposite her, notebook in my lap, watching as she underlined phrases on a document that had more legalese than English. This clause here, she said, tapping once, clarifies it. Any improvements made to trust property are considered part of the trust and remain with the trust's beneficiary. No reimbursement required. Especially, she paused for effect, when the so-called improvements were unauthorized. I leaned back. So, my parents renovated the kitchen thinking it was theirs. It never was, she said. They were stewards, temporary residents. And if they're foolish enough to claim reimbursement, they already did. I interrupted, pulling out my phone. Email from Daniel. Sent this morning. Subject line, equity owed. Rachel let out a single huff of laughter. Oh, they're adorable. I drafted a reply right there in her office. Calm, cold, legal. Dear Mr. Morgan. Per the terms of Joseph Morgan's trust, all property improvements made without written authorization are deemed voluntary. No reimbursement shall be issued. Regards, Julia Morgan. I hit send and exhaled. Later that night, Carly and I stood in the Morgan kitchen, my kitchen. It gleamed with granite countertops and a new gas stove, the kind of update Daniel had once bragged about at barbecues. The lighting was recessed, sleek, cold. You want me to take pictures for the file? Carly asked, phone in hand. Yes, I said. Document everything. If they break even a cabinet on the way out, it goes on the damages list. She snapped shots from every angle, counter's fixtures, pantry door, even the wine fridge Linda had once called an investment in ambiance. As Carly moved to the dining room, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Hello, you little snake? Daniel? His voice was low, too steady to be safe. You're embarrassing this family, he hissed. After everything we gave you. I pressed the record button on my phone. Everything you gave me, I asked. You mean 30 minutes to pack? You won't get away with this. I'm not trying to get away, I said. I'm standing exactly where I belong. I let him rant for another 30 seconds, then ended the call. Saved the recording to a new folder labeled Potential Harassment Evidence. Later that night, I opened Twitter, typed slowly, deliberately, nice countertops. Too bad they were installed in my house. I hit post. 10 minutes passed. Then a reply. Linda Morgan. We were just trying to teach her responsibility. If love has an expiration date, I'm past mine and choosing who stays from now on. It rained again that morning, though the air wasn't cold. I watched droplets trail down Carly's window like they had somewhere more important to be. She made us cinnamon toast while scrolling her phone, occasionally scoffing at a headline or meme. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I couldn't stop thinking about my 10th birthday. Linda had posted pictures of an elaborate cake bought for a work event captioned Busy Day. She hadn't even remembered until Grandpa Joe showed up that evening with a gift card and a bag of gummy worms. He'd called it the Essentials Kit for growing up. That night, I found myself retracing the steps of those memories, starting with a walk past the elementary school I once attended. Its swings still creaked the same way. The mural Grandpa had helped fund had faded, but it was there, our last name etched beneath a painted oak tree. I sat on a nearby bench, letting time fold over itself. Later on Carly's suggestion, we visited the LGBTQ+ youth center downtown. She volunteered there, sometimes helping with resume workshops and organizing mutual aid drives. I tagged along with no purpose but quiet. That's where I met Jake. He was 19, wore a jacket 2 sizes too big, and had eyes like he expected disappointment in every conversation. You're Carly's friend, he asked, peeling the label off a plastic water bottle. I nodded. Julia, I heard about your story, he said. Online? Something about evicting your parents? I raised an eyebrow. People really latch onto the wrong part. He shrugged. Same. Mine kicked me out when I brought a guy home. Said they needed space to realign their values. He laughed bitterly. I guess values need closets. I didn't laugh. I just asked, where are you staying couch surfing? My aunt said I could crash for a few nights, but... He trailed off. I didn't know Jake. I didn't owe him anything. But something in his voice, some familiar wobble under practiced sarcasm, grabbed at my ribs. You should come by sometime, I said. Just to hang out. I've got more space than I know what to do with. He blinked. Seriously, I nodded. Seriously. That night, I lay in Carly's apartment staring at the ceiling fan. The phrase "you can't choose parents" echoed again. Grandpa's voice, warm, resolute. But you can choose family. My phone buzzed beside me. Anonymous message. Don't get too comfortable. The media knows now. They thought they'd won the lottery. Turns out the ticket was never theirs. The financial advisor's office was all glass and silence, glass walls, glass desk, glass water pitcher. Even the man behind the desk seemed translucent, like the only thing real in the room was the weight of the legacy I'd just claimed. Everything checks out, he said, fingers tapping across 3 monitors. You now have full control of the Morgan Trust, including liquid assets, investment portfolios, and real estate. I nodded, not quite trusting my voice yet. And as for the disbursement history, he continued, swiveling a screen toward me. It appears Daniel and Linda Morgan have been drawing from Joseph Morgan's dividends since 2020. 3 years. 3 years of dinners, vacations, and renovations funded by an account they didn't own. 3 years of indulgence disguised as inheritance. 3 years of lies. I scrolled through the records with my thumb, each entry dated and signed. Car payments, boutique charges, a wellness retreat that cost more than my first semester of college. They've been living like kings, I muttered, with someone else's crown. That night back at Carly's, I stared at my laptop until the screensaver kicked in. Jake, lounging on the floor with a bowl of popcorn, glanced up. You gonna do it? I didn't answer. Your silence is very loud, he added. I pulled the laptop toward me and opened my video editor. We spent an hour setting up a shot, nothing fancy. Just me in a hoodie, hair pulled back, no makeup, sitting in front of a blank wall. Jake adjusted the ring light. Authenticity. That's what sells. I pressed record. My name is Julia Morgan. On my 18th birthday, my parents gave me a locksmith and a cake. They told me to leave, and I did. What they didn't expect was that my grandfather left me something too. Not just money, not just property, truth. I inhaled slowly. For years they spent what wasn't theirs. Called it love, called it parenting. But let's be clear, they didn't raise me. They used me. Click. Jake gave me a slow thumbs up. It was like watching a courtroom speech on Netflix. We uploaded it that night. 90 seconds. One girl, one truth. I went to brush my teeth. When I came back, it had 12,000 views. 20 minutes later, $42,000. By the time I refreshed again, $100,000. Then a DM popped up from an account with a blue checkmark. Phoenix Weekly News requesting interview re-viral inheritance video. Please contact our producer ASAP. A house doesn't forget the warmth it once held, or the people who stole it. The key turned in the lock with a click that echoed into silence. No one was inside, and yet the house felt expectant. I stood just past the threshold, letting the door whisper shut behind me. The last time I walked out, it had closed like a judgment. Now it welcomed me like a breath held too long. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the lines in the hardwood, the places where the furniture had left ghostly outlines. I could still smell faint traces of lemon cleaner and the cinnamon candles Linda used to light when guests were coming over. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was clearing its throat. I moved room to room, letting my fingers trail along the door frames, my steps slow like the house, and I were reintroducing ourselves. In Grandpa's old den, I opened the drawer he used to call his junk vault. Inside, beneath a rusted compass and a broken penlight, was his watch. The one with the cracked leather band and the ticking that sounded like a heartbeat. I slipped it onto my wrist. It was too big, but it still fit. Beside it, a sealed envelope with my name. If you're here, it worked. The note began in his familiar typewriter font. I didn't know when you'd find this, but I knew you would. This house isn't just wood and plaster. It's a promise. Make it yours. Julia, not just in deed, but in spirit. Fill it with the kind of love no one can take. I pressed the letter to my chest, eyes burning. By mid-afternoon, Carly and Jake arrived carrying grocery bags and a Bluetooth speaker. We come bearing housewarming chaos, Carly announced. She dropped her bag and opened the kitchen window. This place needs music and garlic. Jake set the table with plastic plates and made a show of bowing before the old radio on the counter. Bless this dwelling, ye shrine of new beginnings. We cooked pasta, argued about the best movie soundtracks, and danced barefoot on the cool tile. Laughter filled the corners like light returning after a long storm. Later, I found a photo in one of Grandpa's albums, me at 6 sitting on his lap, our heads touching. We were both laughing. I scanned it, printed a copy, and framed it with a caption written in gold ink, "Real Family." I hung it above the fireplace where Linda's curated minimalist canvas used to hang. As the sun dipped lower, casting amber slants across the walls, I reached into my bag and pulled out the new lock. This one clicked louder, stronger. I turned the key and held it in my palm. One key. Mine. I turned off the lights, ready to settle into this new version of home, when my phone buzzed. Live interview confirmed. PHX8 News. Parents will attend. You're on air in 36 hours. They gave me 30 minutes to erase my life. I gave them 30 days to pack up theirs. The afternoon sun was soft, almost kindly, as I stepped onto the lawn. The tulips Grandpa planted last spring nodded in the breeze, but the stillness felt heavy with waiting, with inevitability. Time was no longer on anyone's side but mine. I stood beside a sheriff's deputy in crisp uniform, and behind me, Aunt Rachel held the official court order. Carly hovered behind her phone, quietly rolling video. Daniel and Linda had not moved out. Past the deadline, the deputy said, voice neutral. Residency must end immediately. Daniel came out face flushed. He wore a wrinkled polo and sweatpants. Linda followed, clutching a suitcase that looked half-packed. Their eyes, his filled with anger, hers with panic, went to me. I met them without flinching. Rachel handed the order to the deputy, who positioned himself within earshot. Linda stepped forward. Please. Julia. It's not like this. It's exactly like this, I replied softly. My voice didn't waver. Enough years of hurt had gone graciously under my skin. Daniel opened his mouth to shout. He said, You think you can do this to me? Your own kid. You're not my kid, I said. Not this family. Carly lifted her phone. Daniel paused. He sneered, repeated something defamatory, cruel, until Carly tapped record louder. He sputtered as she walked closer. Voice steady. Carly. I'm going to sue for defamation. The deputy cleared his throat. Daniel recognized reality then. Linda glanced at the order, tears forming. Please give us a few days, she pleaded, voice breaking. 30 minutes was all I ever got, I said. Now you'll get none. Aunt Rachel nodded at the deputy, the order enforced. The deputy motioned Daniel away. Daniel glanced at me one last time. Shock, betrayal, fear tangled in his eyes. Linda dropped her gaze, shoulders shaking. I inhaled spring air, cool and clear. This house remembers who loved it. You never did. Then Rachel stepped beside the deputy, subtly placing a restraining edge under the order, making it permanent. Carly shut off her camera and slid her phone into her pocket. In the quiet, Daniel muttered loud enough for me. This isn't over, Julia. I didn't flinch. I whispered, just for me. You're right. It's just the start of my life. The truth didn't just surface, it shattered everything they built. Stepping into the TV studio felt surreal. The fluorescent lights above were harsh, unforgiving, but somehow I felt ready. Carly stayed close behind, reassuring with her quiet presence. A makeup artist dabbed foundation onto Linda's forehead while Daniel sat stiffly, gaze darting around like he couldn't trust a single person in that room. When the camera rolled, they both looked uneasy. Linda clutched the edge of the desk, fake tears shimmering, while Daniel tapped his foot, jaw clenched tight. The anchor, mid-40s, confident in a charcoal suit, smiled at me and adjusted her papers. Julia Morgan. Thank you for joining us tonight. She turned, barely looking at my parents. Daniel and Linda Morgan are seated here. Mrs. Morgan, Mr. Morgan. Why now? I inhaled slowly and exhaled. Calmness was the sharpest blade, because timing changes nothing. My grandfather's trust became effective on my 18th 24 days ago, but my parents didn't stop spending. They didn't stop lying. I clicked on a tablet handed to me by an assistant. The screen glowed with documents, trust paperwork, deeds, investment records, a timeline, and critical screenshots of Linda's Facebook post celebrating the empty nest. Each frame projected in high resolution behind me. "Is this real?" the anchor asked voice, soft but direct. I nodded. Every page notarized, every message time-stamped. I pressed play on a recording. The studio fell silent as Daniel's voice filled the air. "You embarrassing this family. You're not going to get away with it." He sounded enraged, unfiltered. I leaned forward. That voice belonged to the man who locked me out on my birthday. Sympathy shifted palpably across the set. The anchor inhaled sharply. "Mrs. Morgan, would you like to respond?" Tears-streamed fingers clenched the desk. "We were doing what was best for you," I interjected softly, voice steady. "Not for me." The anchor closed her notebook and turned to the camera. "Viewers, we've verified these documents. They're now available on our website." Screens behind me flickered through evidence, primary residence deeds, trust files, even Grandpa's letter to me. I exhaled the room's energy rushing in. When the anchor turned back, her eyes locked mine. I nodded. Then I stood up. "They taught me how to survive. Grandpa taught me how to live." I sat again, silence ringing like a verdict. The cameras cut. The anchor reached toward the monitor, still showing evidence. I felt like justice had weight, not loud, but undeniable. That moment, it didn't just change their story. It changed mine. Empires built on lies don't fall gently, they collapse into silence. The grocery store smelled like floor cleaner and overripe bananas. I walked in for oat milk and left with a moment I hadn't expected. There, between the cleaning supplies and the paper towels, was Linda kneeling to stock a bottom shelf of canned soup. She moved slowly, trying not to be noticed, but our eyes met anyway. No words, just a look. There wasn't hate in her eyes, only a bruised kind of embarrassment, the kind you can't return. I stood still, oat milk in hand, letting the weight of the moment stretch between us like old elastic. Then I nodded once and walked past. Some empires fall in fire. Others just fade. Later that afternoon, Carly texted from the porch. "Delivery guy's here. You'll want to see." I came downstairs barefoot and opened the door. Daniel stood on the sidewalk gripping a box of groceries. He wore a branded polo and khakis creased in the wrong places and a cap pulled low. The delivery van behind him coughed and hissed. Our next-door neighbor waved from her porch, then leaned toward me with a smirk. "That's your dad, huh?" she said, stage whispering. "Wow, heard everything. Honestly, good for you." Daniel didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. He just handed over the bag, turned, and walked back toward the van. I didn't say anything either. Some silences weren't awkward, they were overdue. Carly appeared behind me with a mason jar full of lemonade and handed it over like a trophy. We sat on the steps and watched the van sputter away. The mailbox rattled that evening, and inside was a letter addressed in looping handwriting I hadn't seen in years. "Julia, we watched the news. We read the trust documents. We heard the recording. There's no excuse. But maybe there's acknowledgement. You were brave. We were wrong. Uncle Marcus." The paper felt thick, like it was trying to mean something. I stood on the porch rereading the words, then held the letter out and slowly tore it in two. The wind took the pieces before they could hit the ground. Not every apology deserves a home. Just then, Carly pushed the screen door open with her hip and grinned. "Hey," she said, "there's someone who wants to rent the guest room." I didn't just inherit walls and a roof, I inherited freedom. The sun dipped low behind the oleander hedge, washing the house in soft amber light. The floors no longer creaked with memory they breathed. The air smelled faintly of garlic and fresh paint, the kind of scent you only get when a place is loved, not just lived in. I stood in the hallway with the final portrait in my hands, Grandpa Joe smiling with his eyes more than his mouth. The frame was mahogany, simple and strong like he was. I hung it just outside the kitchen where the scent of rosemary chicken floated in from Carly's cooking. The photo caught the evening light perfectly like he'd timed it himself. In the dining room, Jake balanced 3 spoons on his nose and tried to keep Sarah from swiping one while giggling. She was repainting the hallway, a pale lavender, each stroke deliberate and hopeful. It wasn't just about changing the walls, it was about choosing the colors this time. Aunt Rachel arrived a little after 7 holding a pie in one hand and her phone in the other. "Still can't believe the scholarship came through," she said, setting the pie down. "That makes 2 of us." I smiled. Carly set the table with mismatched plates and lit a single candle. Rachel raised her glass. To Joe, who knew before any of us, and to Julia, who made him proud. We clinked glasses, laughter following like steam from a warm pie. It wasn't a party, but it felt like one. No music, just murmurs and spoons clinking against ceramic. After dinner, I slipped away. I walked through the house slowly, barefoot. The living room was mine now, not because my name was on a deed, but because every cushion, every corner echoed laughter that didn't hurt. The upstairs hallway no longer carried whispers behind closed doors it welcomed. I paused at the room that used to be mine, then Grandpa's, now just the room with the skylight. I opened the door and stepped in. I remember everything I whispered. I remembered him teaching me how to change a tire. The way he left lemon drops in his coat pocket even when he claimed he'd stopped buying candy. The times he'd read me pages of legal documents like bedtime stories. "So you'll know what's yours," he'd say with a wink. I stood in that memory a long time. When I returned downstairs, a letter waited on the table. I hadn't noticed it before, thin white marked with the Phoenix Aerospace Foundation seal. I tore it open gently. "Dear Julia Morgan, we are pleased to inform you that your full scholarship has been approved. Your application reflected resilience, leadership, and exceptional promise." The words blurred for a second. I blinked, reread them. Scholarship. Approved. They were right about one thing: adults pay their own way. They just never expected me to send the bill. The journal lay open across my knees, its spine cracked and worn from years of false starts. But tonight the words came easily. I sat cross-legged on my bedpan, moving without hesitation. This letter wasn't meant for anyone to read, but I hoped he'd hear it anyway. "Dear Grandpa, you were right. About all of it. About love and truth, and how silence can be louder than shouting. I found the watch. I found the house. I found myself too." They left quietly. No apologies. No redemption arcs. Just space, and finally peace. The kind you planted in me a long time ago. I used to think the worst thing was losing your voice. But now I know. You gave me mine. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it between my palms like a prayer, and walked to the corner of the room. The floorboard creaked softly under my weight, same as it had when I was a child sneaking in candy or hiding drawings. I lifted it, slipped the letter into the hollow, and let the wood fall back into place. Carly's voice called up the stairs. "Roof," I smiled. On my way. The night was still, save for the hum of cicadas and the whisper of a breeze. We sat on the roof together, feet swinging off the edge, the city stretching in front of us in 1,000 points of light. So Carly said, nudging me, "What now?" I looked out over the neighborhood. This place that had tried to bury me then became the foundation I rebuilt on. "Now we live," I said, exhaling slowly, freely, kindly, fiercely. She grinned. "And maybe for once, quietly. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." We laughed, and I let the sound settle around me. Later, when the night had folded into itself, I went downstairs and locked the front door. Not to keep anyone out, but because everything that mattered was already inside. My past, my people, my peace. This home didn't need guards, it needed guardians. The lock clicked into place. Solid. Certain. And then came the knock. A gentle, measured knock, not desperate or angry, but deliberate. I opened the door. A woman stood there, maybe 60, in a slate gray coat and sensible shoes. She held an envelope in both hands like it was fragile. "You don't know me," she said softly, "but I knew your grandfather." The porch light caught a silver locket at her neck, the kind I'd seen before once in an old photo on Grandpa's mantle. I stepped aside, holding the door wide open. Not with fear, with welcome. Justice came not with vengeance, but with quiet strength and undeniable truth. Julia didn't just reclaim a house, she reclaimed her worth brick by brick, word by word. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, and leave a comment. Type 1 if this story resonates with you, or 2 if it left you wanting more.